what would you like to add?
I'd like to add that I've been somewhat stunned that we've spent so much time today talking about the states that generate 5% of the energy for the entire United States as a model for the rest of the United States. And I think that's the most troubling aspect of this, is looking at that small subset as the model for the rest of the country, which doesn't look anything like the rest of the country.
And I think you mentioned earlier that those same states actually have higher costs of energy than the rest of the states. Let me just note that when jobs are really destroyed in our country, and whether they're in Maryland or anywhere else, if what is being mandated is a use of what we have as wealth in a country, and now it takes more wealth to do something, that means there are fewer jobs because there is not the wealth to create the jobs. That's one of those basics that we know about. One excuse would be for doing that, if you want to eliminate wealth that doesn't need to be eliminated and have the jobs there, would be if public health was involved in this. And what I'd like to know, basically what we're talking about today are regulations that are not really aimed at public health. We're aimed at CO2 reduction. Is CO2 a threat to public health?
It is a threat to public health.
The CO2 actually is harmful to human beings.
Not breathing it in, but the impacts of climate change.
Okay, no. That's enough of that. Wait a minute.
And it's also associated with
that is ridiculous. That is totally absurd. So CO2 is not harmful to human beings, right? But all these other things that we can then conjure up are in developing CO2 become hazardous to the health of human beings. Frankly, that one extra step is a big step, because some people don't believe that CO2 actually is a major factor in climate change for our planet. Let me just ask, earlier on we had so CO2 is not harmful to human beings' health itself. Earlier on, Mr. Collins, my colleague, asked about all of these regulations would, even in the reduction of CO2, would only result in a 2% reduction in the production of CO2. I remember that. I'm not sure who.
Can I just, to put this in context?
Yes.
A study came out not that long ago that said if you assume this regulation is fully implemented by 2030,
yes.
What this regulation do, this massive shift in our economy, that would be equal to about 21 days of current emission from coal-fired power plants in China. And by 2030, it's projected it would be something like 12 days.
And we're talking about CO2 production.
Right, CO2 production.
Which, by the way, is not harmful to people's health. The byproduct of manufacturing it can be conjured up that. But CO2 itself is not harmful. But this reduction of CO2 that we're talking about, this 2%, is that 2% of what mankind is producing, or is it a 2% reduction of what CO2 represents as part of our atmosphere? The 2% reduction, is it not? We're not talking about 2% of the reduction of what CO2 in the whole atmosphere. We're only talking about a 2% reduction in mankind's addition. Is that correct? Right.
Yes, it is. And to be clear about it, this specific regulation is 0.2% of the overall CO2.
Okay. And let me note that CO2 then, we're talking about a 2% reduction of what some people think are going to have a draconian effect on our economy. That is 2% less than 1/2 of 1/10 of 1% of the atmosphere. Not 2%. People would think it's 2% of what's in the atmosphere of CO2. That's not what we're reducing. We're reducing the 1/2 of 1/10% of the atmosphere, okay, is CO2, and we are reducing the mankind's percent of that, and which is only 1/10 of that. Is that correct? So what we're really talking about is 1/10 of 1/2 of 1/10 of 1% of the atmosphere that would be affected by this at all. In order to, let me just state, CO2, again, is not harmful to people's health. Reducing it by this teeny-weeny microscopic amount and hurting people's jobs, except for throwing us into turmoil and restructuring our business, is absurd. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman.